Media's war against religion is alive and well. A recent front-page story in the New York Times reported on the alleged rise of atheism in America. And, of course, a story like that didn't go unnoticed by Bill Maher. Let's take a look.
What do you think of the fact that it seems to be a movement that's gaining credibility as of late? Well, it was on the front page of the New York Times this week in a number of places around the country that you might not think it would be happening. When they put up a billboard that says, atheists, please call, there was no complaints. There was just people saying, hey, I want to join.
So is the New York Times and other liberal media outlets responsible for pushing an atheist agenda? Joining me now is Bernie Goldberg is with us. Bernie, good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean.
All right. There is, and I've said this for years, a hostility in the media towards Christian conservatives. Do I overstate that case? To be an atheist, you have to believe that it is possible, which I think is a far greater leap of faith. That's something that can be created out of nothing. When you look at the majesty and sophistication and the intricacy of the universe that we do know and comprehend, you have to believe that somehow that this energy could have existed on its own, and I do not believe that is. That, to me, is a leap of faith.
You give me the awful impression, I hate to have to say it, of someone who hasn't read any of the arguments against your position ever.
I've read all the arguments.
I don't see how you can be saying this. Look, you want your God to take responsibility for the huge number of collapsing stars and imploding galaxies and destroyed universes and failed solar systems that have left us in this tiny corner on the one planet in this petty solar system that can support life some of the time on some of its surface. And you want a creator who's filled this Earth with species since life began, 99% of which are now extinct already. And this is some design, isn't it?
You are believing that there is a possibility, without a creator, that somehow energy has created itself, or that energy predates or any concept of time, and energy that, for example, something that can come out of nothing, because fundamentally there has to be that starting point. You seem to be angry with religion, angry with God. Am I wrong in my perception?
Not with God, obviously. That would be absurd. We had enough of people who think, like you, that they know what God wants and that they've got God on their side.
But I will tell you this. You are right, and I agree with actually many of the observations you made about how religion has been perverted and how it is being used for destruction. There is, and I've said this for years, a hostility in the media towards Christian conservatives. Do I overstate that case?
No. Let's take this New York Times story as one example. It's a perfectly legitimate journalism story to talk about the rise of atheism in America, if indeed the facts are correct. Now, the Times put it on page 1. Now they're sending a message. The message is, we think this is important. Well, here's what they didn't think was important. When a book came out by a Syracuse University professor saying that conservatives are more generous than liberals when it comes to giving money to charity, and the reason that they're more generous is because of their Christian faith or their religious faith. That story didn't wind up on page 1 of the New York Times, or page 2, or page 5, or page 10. In fact, there was no news story about that. There was no book review of the guy's book. There was an op-ed, but that was all. Now, why is that? Why is a story that says people of faith, by the way, even liberals of faith, are generous when it comes to giving money to charity. So religion was the key.
And because I love it.
That story didn't interest the editors at the New York Times, but the rise of atheism did.
I don't know whether the New York Times has ever reviewed your books. I don't know what shows you've been invited on. Now, in fairness, my book was #1 for 5 weeks in a row, my last book on the New York Times list. Mark Levin's book is now 7 weeks in a row. He's not been invited on any of the mainstream media shows. You went through this same type of treatment as a conservative. Is this more broadly conservative and less about religion? Is this about political philosophy?
Yeah, that's a good question. The two seem to meld in the minds of many liberal elites. When it comes to religion, for instance, a lot of liberal elites, including liberal elites inside newsrooms, think that people who believe in an invisible man who lives in the sky and, you know, can send fire down with his fingertips, people who believe that, the elites think, aren't too smart. Because that's irrational, they think. Well, what's the opposite of that? Atheism. Atheism is rational to them. It's smart to them. It's hip in places like Manhattan. So that's why atheism is given this kind of prominence on page 1, and a lot of things having to do with religion, in a good sense, just aren't. But we can't separate the religious part from the conservative part because they're very closely linked together.
Is that why Barack Obama, in spite of the overwhelming history about America being founded on Judeo-Christian principles, can say this is not a Christian nation? Is that why he could say we're not at war with Islam? We've never been at war with Islam. We've been at war against radical Islam, and we've been at war against terrorism. So is that where maybe this is, look, because I agree with you. I think there's a certain fundamental belief that if you believe in God, you believe in faith, that you have, you're not quite as smart as they are. There's a certain elitism.
Right.
But they, in my view,
that's right,
they believe something can come from nothing. Even if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, well, where did all that energy and all those molecules come together to bang together and create universes within universes? It seems like a far greater miracle to me.
No. Let me tell you about a true story that I witnessed when I was at CBS News that may put some of this in perspective. There was a conference call with producers from all around the country, New York, Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, and they were talking about the stories that were going to go on the air the next day. And I wasn't part of the call, but I heard it on the speakerphone. And the producer in Washington said, well, there's a rally tomorrow with Gary Bauer. Gary Bauer was the head of a family values organization.
Yeah.
And she said, she said, there's a rally tomorrow with Gary Bauer. And this is a verbatim quote. You know, that little nut from the Christian group. Right? Wow. That little nut from the Christian group. And not one person on the conference call said anything like, you can't say that. Could you imagine if a CBS News producer said, Jesse Jackson, the nut from the black group, or some nut from the Hispanic group, or some nut from the gay group?
Good point.
That would never be tolerated. But saying somebody's a nut from a Christian group, no problem.
At the Correspondents' Dinner, putting aside, we've dealt with the Wanda Sykes, you know, wishing Rush Limbaugh dead, the president laughing aspect of this, which I think is, you know, it's unforgivable to me, because if it was ever said about the president, we know what the reaction would be.
This is little Hussein. Little Hussein wanted to see true and good Americans. Osama bin Laden! Born in Kenya, citizen of Indonesia! Kill some more babies, you bastard! Yeah! You baby killers!
Were you as surprised? The one thing that Barack Obama said, which was funny, and all good humor is rooted in truth, is when he goes, and I know you all voted for me, meaning the press.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me about that. Thank you. Listen, he said, most of you covered me, pause, all of you voted for me. They didn't just laugh, they applauded. All good humor has a ring of truth to it. This had a lot more than a ring of truth to it. They all knew it was true, and the most important thing is they didn't care and they weren't embarrassed. Yeah. That's the important thing.
Well, I got to tell you something. Journalism is dead in America. And by the way, that's why we say thank you to all of our viewers, because you know what? This is alternative media. And Bernie, we appreciate, we always love hearing your voice. Thanks for being with us. Journalism is dead in America. This is alternative media.
I love it.